So, what's up, everybody? It is Unrested here, and I am in a different room today because I have company staying over, and I don't want to bother them in the room that they're in right now. And they're watching some TV, so trying to make a JFAQ while people watch TV in the background probably wouldn't work out too well. Anyway, enough of my problems. Let's begin. Jordan begins with, I've heard that most of the streets in Japan don't have names besides major streets. Is this true? Jordan, I just answered this like 2 JFAQs ago. I'm going to send you back about 2 or 3 JFAQs. You can check them out. I answered this one already. They don't have names. To give you a very short answer, they don't have names. It's true. Andrew says, are you excited for Pokemon XY? If so, what excites you most about it? I am excited for XY, and what excites me the most is that this time they're not copying regions of Japan. They're actually exploring Europe and copying regions of that and turning them into like a Pokemon type part of the world. And that's exciting because, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the Japanese aspects like Kanto region and stuff like that, but it's really interesting to see what they're going to do with like a European influence instead of the Japanese influence, because they will still have some of the Japanese influence. I can tell that every time I play the game, but it'll be like Japanese layered on top of European, and that's going to be a really interesting mashup, I think. So I'm really excited for that. What are your hopes for Generation 6? You know, my biggest hopes is just that I'm going to be able to bring my own Pokemon over from older games. I haven't read up if you're able to do that yet. I really worry that I've given an HM to some creature that I really like a lot and that I won't be able to bring him over. Okay, also, one other big hope I have, and this is something I've complained about in the past, is I really hope there's like difficulty levels. I know there probably isn't, but I hope there's harder, difficult stuff, because honestly I blew through almost every game that was on DS for Pokemon. I mean, it's incredibly easy. Richard, who has asked many questions in the past and who I've had some combos with online, cool guy, says, I can't remember if you said anything about this or not. How well do the police receive and help Gaijin with their problems? No, nobody's ever asked that really, so that's actually a good question. You know, I've heard good and bad about this. I'm going to be 100% honest with you guys on this about some of the bad stuff I've heard. I've heard about some problems with sexual harassment on trains and just in the street type situations with a lot of blonde women. And totally unprovoked and done by males, especially salarymen. They tend to be the offenders the most. And when those female blonde women go to the police kind of laugh it off and don't help them so much. And one time I even had a friend who was like drugged at a club. She was given like the equivalent to roofies, and she was throwing up and couldn't walk straight, and she's a pretty hardcore drinker. She can hold her liquor, so something was definitely wrong. She had only had 1 drink and she was really messed up, and the police just did nothing to help her. Like, she asked for help, and actually a Yakuza came along and helped her, which I thought was pretty cool. And he actually drove her home and took her to the hospital first, made sure she was okay, let her finish her checkup and get, you know, her stomach pumped or whatever, and then drove her home. So, and the police did nothing with that situation. I felt really bad for her. But I have good stories too, because I want to balance things out. I recently spoke to a guy who had a friend who was dealing with some racism here in Japan. I guess like his neighbors were being racist or something in his apartment complex, and he complained to the police about vandalism and graffiti that had been around his apartment that was like really racist, like Gaijin go home and stuff like that, which this is a super rare occurrence. This does not happen a lot, but apparently it happened to this guy. And he went to the police, and the police went so far as to clean up all the vandalism and get rid of it. And apparently he said even a part of the actual bricks of the apartment were sprayed on, and they couldn't actually get it off those bricks because it was some kind of really thick, I guess, spray paint. And they actually paid for, I guess, like concrete sanding of that and had it completely removed in that way. And the police paid for that to happen. So good for them for sticking up for that poor guy and his really rough situation. I have not heard of that happening a lot, racism in Japan, as far as being that aggressive, but unfortunately for this guy it did happen, and the police really took charge and cleaned up his situation. Joe Kim says, I have a sweet spot for girls with tattoos, so Japanese girls with tattoos, and what kind of crowds or areas will I find them? Well, if you're coming to my area in Osaka, obviously you want to check out Amemura and maybe Shinsaibashi and Dotonbori, you'll find that. Tokyo area, I can only say Roppongi that I know of. Maybe there's other parts, but I'm not really classified specialist on Tokyo because I live in Osaka. My whole time I've lived in Osaka in Japan. Patricia says, I'll be visiting Yamanashi in October and staying with a pen pal I met over 2 years ago. While I've done a ton of research on mannerisms and know most of my innocent mistakes will be forgiven, do you have any suggestions on what I should and shouldn't do while staying with her at home? Well, honestly, if she's a younger woman like yourself, you seem to be young from this picture, you're pretty much going to be okay, Patricia. The younger someone is in Japan, the more forgiving I find they are. They almost have no problem with anything you would do. I guess maybe one of the biggest things, just not to embarrass yourself out in public, don't move any of the bowls when you eat, like the bowls holding food with your chopsticks. Don't point with your chopsticks. Other than that, okay, I mean, I'm sure you know basic stuff like removing your shoes, but maybe like when you first get there, offer her like kind of a housewarming gift or a visiting gift, like an omiyage, like maybe some nice gourmet cookies or something would be really nice to start things off right. Let's see, who's next here? Guy, his name's just Guy. Hi, I've played with kendama for many years and obviously know that it's a toy of Japanese origin. If you guys don't know what kendama is, you can go look it up right now. The best way I can describe it as kind of a T-shaped kind of ball holder. I don't know how to explain this, it's kind of hard. Look up a picture. It's like T-shaped and it's got a string attached to it and on top there's a ball. You can hit it and bounce it. It's kind of like a hammer at the same time, and then it's got like a kind of a open kind of what would you call it, like kind of gap shape to hold the ball too. So you can play all different types of balance games and catching games with it while still having the rope attached to it. It's pretty interesting. It's popular with elementary school kids, and sometimes you'll actually even see it in Japanese video games used as a weapon, which would definitely be impossible, but it looks cool. Let's see, I'm sorry, what's your question here? However, is it actually common and popular in Japan? It's still very common and popular with elementary school kids. Or is it just a niche interest? Well, there's some people who probably do get into it hardcore and become like really skilled with it. I mean, there's quite a bit you could do to become pretty awesome with it. Is it something you've encountered much? Every time I've done work at a elementary school, there's actually a lesson, because all the lessons are the same for an ALT. They have a guideline, what they follow. One of the lessons, well, you know what, the books have been changed now, so it might have changed the lesson too. But when I worked there, the books, there was one called Eigo Noto, and that one had a lesson that involved the kendama. And I remember one part of it, the Japanese teacher has to ask you to try and show the class if you can do it. So you might actually be given a chance to show kids that you're badass with a kendama, which they'd be super impressed by. Elementary school kids, definitely, they'd be like, nandai sono gaikokujin wa sore wa shiteru? You know, they'd be really excited about that. If you like kendama, you might also want to look up kintama. Just joking. Sorry, I had to say it, because you like playing with balls, right? So look up kintama. Tenuki no kintama. Let's see. Eric says, hey Scott, you were talking about executions and how they are by hanging in Japan. Yes. My question is, do they do this out in public for people to see, to make an example out of that person, or do they do it quietly? Yeah, it's completely a private thing. I don't even know if the family members get to see it, but it's definitely not done in public. That's not the Japanese way. Callie says, I assume that you drove in America. I did. Before you moved to Japan, yes. So I'm wondering if you've driven much in Japan. Not too much. I can count it, I think, 3 times total that I've driven in Japan. How hard was it for you to adjust to the backwards way of driving? Oh, no, it wasn't really that bad. It's not as bad as you would imagine. I thought it would be kind of scary. You know what the scariest thing was? The scariest thing was getting used to how tiny and skinny the roads are. That was actually a little bit scary for me. Let's see. Patricia has another question here. She says, sorry for blowing up JFAQ17. Patricia, that's okay. You can ask multiple questions. Can you tell us a real story of Ken Tanaka? Ken Tanaka doesn't actually live in Japan. I don't know if you guys know that. He actually, I think, lives in California. He lives somewhere in America, I know that. He visits Japan, I think, once a year. I have never actually met him in person. Victor has. He says he's a really nice guy. I was silly enough to fall for his story. Oh, okay, so if you guys don't know who Ken Tanaka is, you can go look him up. He's got a channel called Help Me Find Parents, and it's about how he was adopted by Japanese people even though he's a white guy. It's really a funny, creative, awesome story, and his katakana accent is hilarious. And the man is super talented. Ken Tanaka, I'm a huge fan. He actually wrote me a message one time how he watched some of my videos, and I was honestly flattered. I think the guy's cool. I know, while people who actually know him say he's a great guy and all, I was a little butthurt after finding out the truth about his story. Really? You should be absolutely flattered that you got to see something so awesome. I mean, think about how creative that story is. He does the katakana accent so natural, and I mean, it's a ridiculous story, yes, and I'm kind of surprised you fell for it, but I mean, come on, give the guy some credit. I mean, he's pretty awesome for making that. Okay, let's see. Next up is Bjorn, and Bjorn has asked many a question in the past, and you've always had pretty good questions, Bjorn, so let's take a look at what we've got. Recently, I've started to watch a Kaki no Tsukai Batsu game to practice my hearing skill. Always nice to do so with a bit of humor. Yeah, that's good. Just wondering, are you a fan of Gaki no Tsukai? Cheers from Rhodos. Gosh, you know, I haven't watched that show in ages. Recently, the shows I watch are more up-to-date, like, Best House 123, I watch, Beat Takeshi's Unbelievable, and I'm a big fan of recently that show called Kazoku Game, but I haven't really watched much from the past these days. I'm kind of a recent up-to-date guy. I don't really have time to research much, unfortunately. Jack says, when I graduate and get into the JET program, I'm hoping they place me in Tokushima, although any place in Shikoku would be great. From what I've researched, it seems like Tokushima would be a nice-sized city, but not too big, and Shikoku is very rural and full of nature and mountains. I'm hoping to do the 88 Temple Pilgrimage. Whoa, that's going to be a big hike for you, bud, but hey, ganbatte ne. Watch the Tokushima Awa Odori and try their famous udon noodles. Ooh, that'll be good. From what I've heard, those udon noodles are like really damn good, so definitely check that out. What's your opinion on Shikoku or Tokushima? Well, obviously, those udon noodles are really famous. I've actually seen them on variety shows and stuff. But I've never actually gone to Tokushima and got to check them out myself. If you do, you should definitely make a video and post it. You can even post it as a video response to this or whatever you want, and I'll make sure to promote it, man. Go for it. Jordan says, I've studied Japanese for 3 years to an advanced level. I still don't think I'm great yet. I'm going to Japan with the JET program in a few days. Oh, congratulations, Jordan. What are some phrases I may overhear or need to look out for or need to know if my students or locals are talking about me? I don't care if they do. I just want to surprise them and be like, hey, I understand and I know you're trying to talk smack about me. Jordan, probably, oh no, wait, I'm sorry, he says, I just want to surprise them like, yeah, I know you're trying to talk smack, but I understand you. Okay. Sorry, I read that wrong at the end. You know, they're probably, for the most part, they won't talk too much smack unless you're actually at an elementary school where those kids, they're not necessarily talking smack, but they'll just be really blunt about you in front of you and think you don't know what they're saying. Usually you're going to hear gaikokujin. You're not going to hear gaijin too much. Usually I'm one who always uses gaijin a lot because it's just a quick word to use instead of gaikokujin, but you'll probably hear that a lot. You might hear kokujin too. They might say that, so they'll also still be talking about you. For the most part, if they're talking about you, like, they're gonna talk about, and I don't want you to think race plays into this at all, but for example, my eyes are blue. They've talked about that a lot, like when they see me. If it's my natural hair color, am I wearing contacts? All different types of stuff about yourself that is very different from every normal Japanese person who has, you know, obviously brown eyes, black hair. Those are the things that are going to surprise them the most, and they're not necessarily like talking smack about it or anything, but they're just comparing and contrasting and just really surprised by differences, because you got to remember, especially if you're put in a rural type area, some of these kids have never seen a gaijin before. Devin says, hey, Unrested, my question this week is in relevance to you, a little one on the sentimental side. I was wondering, what over the last few years of JFAQs, what would you say are some of your favorite JFAQ moments, if you could name a few? Oh, Devin, good question. I've never actually thought about that. Honestly, I'd say probably the ones where I've involved other JFAQ members. They really, I hold those like kind of close, because it's really not only interesting to meet other JFAQers around, other JVloggers around Japan. To hang out with them in person and get to know their personality is really fun, because all of them are really down-to-earth, cool people. Maybe the craziest one, the one that I remember quite a bit, is when Victor and I filmed this drunk woman and he went to go help her. I thought, at first I was a little taken aback that he would just go up and talk to anybody, because he's really extroverted and really outgoing. But kind of it moved me with the fact that he went and helped her and helped her family because she was drunk on the street. I thought that highly increased my respect for him. Not that I didn't already respect the guy, but even more so. I'd say also just when I've had parties with other JVloggers, like when I met Cajun Gaijin for the first time, and I met Hiko Simon for the first time. I met who else? Betamax DC, Radri, obviously Tokyo Sam and I are friends too. The first time meeting them and making a video with them, it was so easy and so fun. It's just really something you're like, wow, this type of person is so easy to hang out with, and we share a lot in common. And even if our interests are different, we really connect on the fact that we're both doing the same thing here and we both make videos, which is cool. I guess those are the parts that stand out the most with me. The parts where it's like Osaka meetup and Osaka parties that I've filmed. Louise says, when you were teaching English to Japanese students, what were the hardest aspects of English grammar and or pronunciation that they had? Okay, I'm going to stop there. She has another question, and I'm just going to answer this one first. You know what? Honestly, that kind of varies with each age because of what they're learning for each age. With their very young kids, I find the hardest thing to teach them is pronunciation that the Japanese language just doesn't even have. For example, like the F, using the word that starts with F. Everybody always talks about, oh, R must be really hard to teach. It is hard to teach, but F is hard to teach too. People probably don't know it, but like the F is a FU, you know, type sound, and it's more a soft, like, for example, we always say Fukushima, but honestly it would be like Fukushima. You see how soft that F is in there. So when you teach a word like fish to young kids, because you're teaching them animals most times, they can't say, they don't know to like bite their lip like fish. So that's always been hard to teach them. My personal thing is, I use an example of saying usagi no ha, or usagi no kuchi, which means like a rabbit's mouth. Put your two teeth out like that and bite your lip, like a rabbit, and then they can pronounce the sound of fish. But if you are teaching kids for the first time and you don't teach them how to hold their mouth, they'll just be like heesh, heesh, like they'll do a really soft F. So that's one aspect, but there's so many. I could go on about this for a whole JFAQ. Question 2, I know you've said you have adopted a lot of Japanese values both because you are married to a Japanese woman and because you are living there. Could the opposite be true if a Japanese person marries a gaijin? Definitely. You know, what I've heard from both men and women alike who have married or lived with a gaijin for a long amount of time, especially if they've moved to their country, is they find they become stronger, that they can make their opinion heard much louder and stronger. And sometimes that works out really good for them. They've found they've come back to Japan and they can be a stronger person and be louder with their own opinion. But other times they've said like it's been hard to like convert themselves back to being a little bit quieter about what they think about things. John says, does the radiation still affect Japan? Sorry if you answered this. I'm guessing you mean Fukushima. Yeah, the Fukushima disaster is still affecting Japan. It's still a problem up there. Unfortunately, the people working on it right now are dealing with a lot of problems of thyroid cancer, which is really sad. It's messed up, and really the government should be helping those people out a hell of a lot more. Hugh says, hey Scott, I read somewhere that Japan still has an emperor, but it's sort of a figurehead in Japan. Yep, much like the Queen is in England, exactly like that. And he holds no political influence. Very true. How is the emperor and his family viewed in Japan by its citizens? Is it similar to the UK? What are your thoughts on this? It's probably not as big of a thing as the UK. Like, for example, like if the emperor's wife or even his daughter or someone got pregnant, no one would care really too much. There wouldn't be like huge news about it. I think honestly most Japanese people are more excited about the Queen and everything over there in England more so than they are about their own emperor. I mean, for the most part, he is just a figurehead. He's just kind of a pointless, old-school representation of someone who used to rule Japan but has no power now. I'd say one of the biggest things here are the fact that the Empress, and if I get this correct, or if I get this incorrect, just, you know, correct me in the comments down below. She's dealing with a lot of stress recently, and she actually dealt with a lot of problems with mental stress due to the fact that the staff of the emperor were treating her very poorly. One of the biggest things, and if I have this incorrect, like I said, correct me in the comments, but the Empress was the first time that a person married the emperor where it wasn't arranged marriage. He actually went out of his way and chose her. She's a high-powered businesswoman in her previous life, pretty much, before she got married, and when she got there to be the emperor's wife, apparently she lost a lot of that power and was abused by the emperor's staff due to the fact that they were pissed off that she wasn't the first arranged marriage to the emperor. And apparently she dealt with a lot of stress with that, kind of had a mental breakdown, and just recently she's starting to actually go outside of the emperor's palace again. Before, apparently, she was kind of a hikikomori shut-in. So, kind of a tough situation for her. She seems like a good woman. I know she speaks English, like, perfectly. She's awesome. And she speaks a few other languages, too, apparently. She sounds like an awesome lady. I kind of feel bad for her that she went through that kind of abuse. But then again, she is fabulously rich, so how bad can you feel for her? Zoe says, if your wife came up to you one day and said she was willing to make a video with you, what kind of video would it be? That's a good question, Zoe. Honestly, I would make any kind of video she wanted to. Maybe I would ask her a woman's perspective, a Japanese woman's perspective on a lot of things in Japan, because my wife is a highly intelligent woman. I'm sure she has some really incredible and smart aspect type stuff to say. And she's incredibly versed in Japanese history. I've never met a person more versed in Japanese history than her. In Japan, that is. Brent says, hey Scott, have you ever bought or owned a car, motorcycle, or scooter while there? My wife and I owned a car before we moved into our apartment, but there was no reserved parking spots here, so we had to actually sell our car. If so, what are the related costs in owning one roughly? It's incredibly expensive. One thing I will say for you, I can't cover all the different aspects because my wife actually bought the car, but here's something that kind of sucks. If you don't buy a Japanese-made car, you pay super high insurance and tax on that car. You kind of get raped in that aspect. So I would say if you can, try to buy a Japanese-made car, which is not that bad, but because you're going to pay a hell of a lot of tax if you try to drive around in a foreign car. Joey says, what's up, Broseph? Do you know anything of foreign exchange student programs? Nope, because I've never been a student here. Alright, he's got a long story that he tells me. He met a girl from Russia who's an exchange student. I was wondering, do Japanese schools do this or promote foreign exchange? Okay, so I'm guessing you just want to really know about like what it's like to do a student foreign exchange program in Japan, and do they have them? Yes, they do have them. I only know one person who's ever done them. For the most part, what I know, it's not overly emphasized, and if they do have it, you would already know it at your school. You would have to check out the information at your school. It's a really individual basis as far as like what sister school they're linked up with, so I really can't help you find any kind of info on that. As far as how it goes, I actually had a friend who did it, and he actually did an exchange program when he started his freshman year of college, and somehow they got the paperwork messed up and put him in senior year of high school instead. And he expected that he would be living with college kids who could speak English, and instead he ended up at a Japanese high school where not many people speak English at all. And he was kind of thrown to the dogs as far as having to learn Japanese. And he said it was really hard and really tough because he had studied zero before he came here because he didn't expect to have to speak Japanese. But that because of that, he became like super fluent. Like he is pretty much peta fluent. He is awesome now. So it might be really tough and it might be really hard and even a little bit intimidating. But he said if you ever want to really learn Japanese hardcore, really fast, get thrown to the dogs like he did and you'll be awesome at it. Gregory says, okay, Scott, so what are some of the strangest, weirdest places you've ever been to in Japan? And what are some recommendations? I guess one of the funniest places I've ever been to is Arashiyama, which is also sometimes called Saruyama, Monkey Mountain. And that's up in Kyoto, if I remember correctly. And there you can go and actually feed the monkeys that live on the top of that mountain. And it's kind of funny. I will say though that like a lot of these things people talk to me about, like they are like, I want to go see Monkey Mountain, or I want to go see like a cat cafe, or like that. I think they expect it to be a lot more wacky than it actually is, like wacky and weird and exciting. I mean, for the most part, like when you go to Arashiyama, a lot of people expect that they're going to be like, here you go, monkey, you can eat this. And they're like, oh, I'm so intelligent, thank you, I'm eating it, and you are a wonderful person, let's hang out. And I mean, when you get there, you know, you can give them food, but they're just like any aggressive animal. They're going to, you know, be like, blah, 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 don't try to take it from me, I'm eating it. You know, like, it's not like this really human connection that you find with the monkeys, like some people might think. But it is exciting, it is fun, you can check it out. I will say cat cafes, people seem to be really stoked on those and write to me about them a lot. They're not as exciting as you think. Like, it's literally like going to a cat lady's house and there happens to be coffee served there too. Let's see. Heidegger says, how are divorced women seen in Japan? How about if she has children? Are they seen with shame? Would it be easy for them to get married too after? You know, I actually don't see the difference, but some countries or cultures do. I think no one has asked this before. Heidegger, this is a good question. You are right. Nobody has asked this. Divorced women in Japan, I feel honestly quite sorry for them because there is a stigma to it. However many times you're divorced will be counted as a number. So, for example, nantoka batsu. If you've been divorced once, it'll be batsuichi, one strike against you. Okay, that's literally what they call a woman who's been divorced once. Batsuichi. That means X, batsu, ichi, one X, one strike. And it does carry a certain amount of shame, and it's rough. I feel quite sorry for the fact that Japan is kind of in the 1950s America type social situation with their divorce and how they view it. I know a woman who actually has a shop right next to me here, and she got divorced, and she was treated so badly, she said after it, she actually moved to America and got a working visa in America because she said Americans treated her way better for being divorced once. Like, they didn't see it as a big deal. If you're divorced with a child, it's really damn hard. I actually have a friend who's dating a Batsuichi girl who has a child. And I should actually ask him how that's going, because I think he's a great guy for doing that. And I think he said she really enjoys the fact that he totally doesn't care that she already has a kid or that she's been divorced once, which that's great for her too. I'm happy for both of them. Daniel says, I heard from a doctor that around 55% of Japanese men sit to urinate. Have you ever heard about this? I have not heard about this. I don't know who I could ask to find out if that statistic is true. Should I just start asking Japanese men on the street? I don't know if that's true. Why do they do this? Maybe an overly aggressive housewife who is worried about cleaning up pee on the seat? I don't know why. I possibly will ask some Japanese friends and see if that's any bit true. I kind of doubt it. That sounds a bit strange. Dimitri says, on crack.com there's an article explaining how some Asian countries fail to teach about the Holocaust when they study World War II. and in some of these countries it's completely lost on them when they make use of Nazi insignia or iconography. Some so bad that the use of Adolf Hitler is used as a cute mascot. Other than Japan's role in World War II, how are they taught about the war in Europe? You know, Dimitri, you're actually completely right. Seriously, South Korea and Japan, their history books on World War II kind of just skim over World War II. It's kind of a mark of shame for them. And even my own wife, who, you know, she went through quite a bit of education due to the fact that she has a doctor's license, says that they do rush over that aspect of the war way too fast. And even, you know, things like the rape of Nanking and some of Japan's own horrid past, which, you know, America's got it too. They did horrible things too, I'm not gonna lie. Obviously the atomic bomb was horrible. They just kind of skim over it. They're just kind of like, and also there was the rape of Nanking. Anyway, let's move on. Like she said, it's literally just like a blip in the book. It's just really quick. Same with that too, and I think that's exactly what you're talking about, and you're exactly right. Yeah, usually articles I find on Cracked are actually pretty well researched. There's not a lot of BS on there, so this is actually pretty true. And even my wife has confirmed this, that history books here in Japan kind of just skim over that aspect. Alright, Amanda is next. How it bother you when American remakes Japanese horror films? That's just a slight mistake. I'm sure it was done by Apple Correct. You know, America, when they redo Japanese horror films, it is pretty ridiculous. I think one of the worst parts is they take a lot of the mental horror out of there, a lot of the psychological horror, and replace it with ridiculous, stupid gore that's useless. And that's what I hate when America does adaptations. South Korean films too, like they're about to redo Old Boy. I really don't see that working out well. Linda says, Scott, I have two questions. Number one, how are birthday parties for children, how do birthday parties for children look like in Japan? Are there any differences? There's not really any super big differences. Maybe, you know, they don't play any of the American games though, like, you know, piñata. They don't break a piñata or, you know, play pin the tail on the donkey or anything like that. So it's a little different like that. There's some different games. And number two, would you ever design a tattoo for someone? I have designed tattoos for people in the past. I have a tattoo machine. I've done tattooing. I still do if a friend asks me. Adam says, are you going to the Tokyo YouTube meetup with Hiko and Victor? Not possible. Unfortunately, I guess a lot of people don't quite understand the fact that Tokyo is pretty far from me. It's about 200 miles. And I would actually have to pay quite a bit to go on the Shinkansen to go there, and it would also take a lot of time, and I don't have that because I have two kids that I gotta take care of. I would love to go. I would super love to go, but unfortunately I just don't have the time or the money right now. Justin says, are you excited about the new Godzilla movie? You know what I am about the new Godzilla movie? I'm hesitant. Do you remember the old one, like the old remake one? I mean, that was super bad. That was a huge letdown. I really worry that it's just going to be another CGI fest that focuses only on the CGI and not on any kind of plot. Ichido says, hi Scott, I was wondering, the US has Area 51, Russia has the M Triangle, and Mount Yamantau, I don't know if I've said that right, and Australia has Pine Gap. Are there any areas in Japan that deal with UFOs? Not that I know of, but there might be, because I'm not a big researcher of UFO type stuff. Aokahara Forest is probably the biggest one that people know about, but that doesn't really deal with UFOs. It's more the ghosts of suicides. Ahmed says, what do you prefer, winter or summer? The mountain or the sea? Obviously winter over summer, because in summer I have to hide tattoos under long sleeves. The mountain or the sea? I guess probably the mountain. I'm not as much of a beachgoer these days. Mahad says, did being an artist make writing hiragana or kanji easy or not? You know, actually, I mean, for me, kanji was a bit easier due to the fact that I could, you know, draw lines quite a bit better and straight, but I actually did run into an actual problem that before I learned the stroke order, people said my kanji looked a lot more like art and not like actual writing. So maybe that kind of worked against me. I will say the fact that Japanese people have to draw kanji for their language, I think it makes them way better at art. Like, even people who say that they're not good at art are pretty damn good here. Adrian, last question. Oh my goodness, I get to finish. Adrian says, how reliable is the news in Japan? Here in the United States, many sources are flat out report false, incomplete information just for the sake of reporting. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just start answering this. You've got a second question here, and I'll get to that in a second. News in Japan, for the most part, doesn't cover enough. I think that would be a lot of Japanese people's complaints, that they cover a lot of bullshit within Japan and not enough international stuff. One of the things, and even Japanese people have said to me that they think this is terrible, a lot of Japanese news places, whenever they report any kind of tragedy around the world, the first thing they'll do is mention if Japanese people were killed or if there was no Japanese people killed. So like, you have the earthquake that happened in Haiti or something. They'll be like, but don't worry, there was no Japanese people there, so no Japanese people got killed. Or, you know, that plane that just crashed in America from South Korea, they'll be like, and there was no Japanese people on it, so don't worry, Japan, we're okay. Like, that's kind of a messed up aspect of Japanese news, is the fact that they're always like, but don't worry, no Japanese died. But don't worry, no Japanese died. Like, okay, but it's still a tragedy. It's not any less of a tragedy if no Japanese people died. If humans died, it's a tragedy. So I don't know why they always have to bring that aspect out of it. Like, are people that nationalistic that they only care about their country and if people from their country die? I've had my wife complain about that, and I've actually even listened to a song. I forget which artist sings it, and he talks about how the woman on the news, she says, a huge plane crash happened today, but don't worry, no Japanese people died, and she smiles. And he's talking about how fucked up that is. So even Japanese people are kind of pissed off about that. Alright, and here at the end he says, for example, the Travon Zimmerman case, does this sort of thing happen in the Japanese news? You know what does happen a lot in, I won't say necessarily Japanese news, but criminals do tend to get off quite easy in Japan. You would be surprised how short of a sentence that a murderer would get here in Japan. Sometimes only like 2 years or 1 year. Or for example, politicians who are cheats, for example Ozawa, who stole tons of money, just totally got off for free because he pretty much had a good lawyer that got him out of court and out of jail. So there's a lot of corruption within the court system, and I would say the news could be a little bit better, but it's still really interesting to watch and read about here in Japan, so I'll at least give it that. At least it's interesting. Anyway, that's about it for now. I'm going to go ahead and end this here because my camera battery and card is running out of memory and power. Until next time, I'm Unrested. This is JFAQ. Thanks again, guys, for all your great questions. You guys are doing awesome. You feel like my friends every time I do this. It's my only chance I get to talk in fluent, full, utter any word I want English, so it's a great time for me. Until next time, Unrested JFAQ. Have a good one.